Welcome to the Record on the Road. I'm Mark Maxwell outside the Soldiers Memorial, just down the street from our KSDK station and studios. Turns out we don't have to go all that far to find some record-setting history. We're coming to you on Juneteenth, the day America remembers the pain of delay, freedom's overdue arrival, and the fight to keep it real for everyone who calls this country home. Now, a new exhibit opens inside these doors, honoring the heroism of the Tuskegee Airmen, America's freedom flyers. These were daring and courageous black men who defied the odds in the air over Nazi-controlled Europe. While back at home, it was a chapter of history when they weren't always welcome at water fountains, swimming pools, or school buses in their own hometowns. Yet, in the dangerous skies above Italy and North Africa, they proved they belonged. They belonged in the Stars and Stripes, they belonged in a cockpit, and they belong still in the indelible pages of history that no executive order can erase. They live on in the memories of those who live among us still. 97-year-old Mary Thompson knew one of those men, Eugene Carter, from Emory, Mississippi. She was best friends with his sister. She recalled living life on the other side of the tracks. And all these years later, she still remembers the hope he carried on his shoulders when so much of the country shut its doors in his face.
Never give up. It may take a long time, but never give up. They could become general like Davis or anybody else. It takes time, and just don't give up, that's all. It's beautiful, and it's beautiful that I'm still living to see it.
That same resolve, born in a segregated town, carried into war, now fuels a young man named Tyshawn Krull. He wasn't born into the Tuskegee legacy by blood, but he calls it family by bond. He's chasing that same blue sky, hoping his wings one day catch the wind those red tails cut through first. But he's not leaving those dreams to chance. He's taking their lesson of drive and determination to heart.
To always do. There's a lot of opportunities, and I even hear it from my family a lot and just people that I come by. If you don't ask, if you don't try, if you don't walk forward towards your goals, you're not going to get them. You won't know if you could get them. So it's to always do. Just watch me.
Inside, history hangs on these walls, and it beckons to those who pass by on the sidewalk here. You find medals, uniforms, and flight records on the walls there. They speak for themselves, but so do the people who keep this legacy alive today. I sat down with U.S. Air Force veteran Mark Sundlov, who oversees this memorial, and with Officer Yolanda Wood, who leads the Hugh J. White chapter of the Tuskegee Airmen, to talk about why remembering these airmen now means as much as ever before. What do you hope visitors carry with them when they walk back out of these doors?
I hope that they realize that St. Louis has a vibrant history with the Tuskegee Airmen. Over 90 men and women participated, and that their legacy is relevant. That they achieved in World War II and afterwards, and that challenge, that mantle is required for them to lift up and carry forward.
Can you share something from this exhibit that stands out to you, something that you think best captures the courage or sacrifice of these men and women that stops you in your tracks when you walk past it?
Yeah, I think, for me, well, there's a lot of things in this exhibit. I think the way that it's designed, especially to set off the St. Louisans, and to see those individual stories of the St. Louisans and what they accomplished, it gives that very real connection, right? So one of our taglines here at Soldiers Memorial is find yourself here, right? And I think when these young men and women see these individuals on the wall and they see that they graduated from Bashan or they graduated from Sumner, that they say, oh, that's where I go to school, right? So they can make that connection. They can find themselves here, and there's stories of heroes, right? There's stories of people who accomplished incredible things, and there's no reason that the young men and women who are visiting this exhibit can't do the same thing.
It sounds like you're describing a sense of pride.
Yeah, pride, and I think inspiration, right? That I think we all need to be inspired, right? We all need to have people that we look up to, people that we say, well, if that person did it, then I can do it too, right? And this exhibit's full of that, and I think that for me, that's the big takeaway.
I recently learned about some of the ongoing mentorship through chapters like the one that you represent and operate. Young people like Tyshawn who dream of flying or serving or leading in generations in the future. What does that operation look like day to day, and why is it so important for you to carry that torch forward?
I stood on the shoulders of Tuskegee Airmen. I flew as a navigator, but that legacy of the Tuskegee Airmen is carried on through the chapters that are nationwide. The Hugh J. White chapter in the St. Louis and the Lewis Lynch chapter out of Scott Air Force Base. We have scholarships for high school seniors. We have drone programs where we introduce individuals to drones, aviation, finances, literacy, all kinds of different opportunities, because a lot of times people say, well, I don't know anyone who's done it. That's not a valid excuse. If you come to this display, you will find the George Carper whose business, you'll find the legislators, you will find the people who served in the military and came home and continue to serve. And my challenge to Tyshawn and all the young members in my chapter is to continue. I expect them to succeed, and my job is to help them get the skills they need.
There's also right now an ongoing national conversation about which stories get told and which ones are muted or possibly even erased from classrooms, from training programs. When you see any effort to minimize or to completely remove Black military history, for example, what's at stake for the young people who your chapter mentors?
If you know someone has succeeded, then you have no excuse not to. There's a difference between achievement and recognition. The Tuskegee Airmen were the first Top Guns. In 1949, they won and were the first Top Guns. Sorry, it wasn't Tom Cruise. And so, but they weren't notified, they weren't given that recognition for 40 years. But the Tuskegee Airmen stood tall and said, I achieved it. I need all the young folks in America to know that there is a legacy of achievement, and that legacy they can stand on and stand behind and stand in front and use that to know that whatever they want to accomplish, they just have to say, watch me.
Mark, museums like yours and like the old courthouse down the street here have become something of unexpected battlefields in the fight over our culture, our history. Have you faced any pressure to change any chapters of how you present American history, and how do you navigate those pressures while trying to stay true to your mission?
Yeah, we haven't experienced those pressures directly, and certainly as part of the Missouri Historical Society, we're very proud of our mission to understand the past, all of its complications, all of its difficulties, all of its warts, all the ugliness, and right alongside with all the great victories and successes, but to look at the whole picture and to really understand who we are. And we firmly believe that gives us the tools that we need to live better today and also make stronger decisions for the future. And I think, when you start to choose and select and curate what stories you'll tell from the past in a way that just shines lights on the bright spots, you're not doing yourselves, you're not doing the future generations any favors at all. You're really, hamstringing yourself and hamstringing society. So thankfully, we don't live, we haven't faced those pressures here at Soldiers Memorial, and we're proud to continue to forward sharing all stories, and we've done that here, whether it was the incarceration of Japanese Americans during World War II, the Tuskegee Airmen, some of the darker chapters of the Vietnam War. We're into that, but we're also into the successes, and we're into remembering those who made the ultimate sacrifice. So it's not a huge museum, but we do our best to tell as full and as encompassing as a story as we can, so people can understand, grow, and then make better decisions for the future.
People can look at the warrior and the wart.
Yeah.
And in some way, it might even undermine the achievement if we overlook the obstacle.
Right, because it doesn't matter that, you can say, well, they won the race, but if you don't know the journey to the race, the value of the winning of that race, the value of achieving gets minimized. The Tuskegee Airmen, the men and women, accomplished a whole bunch. They had the best record for escorting bombers. They had a great record for with the Top Gun. They did a lot. They were trained all over the country. They were your neighbors, they were your uncles, they're your aunts, they're your grandfathers. And you can be proud of them. And because you can be proud of them, you can know your legacy and you can stand tall.
In the political sphere, we sometimes hear terms like woke military used to deride or criticize certain chapters of history or certain topics of discussion, but these airmen fought Nazis abroad while fighting discrimination at home. So how do you respond to any argument that highlighting racial injustice might somehow weaken our military or divide our country?
If we know our roots, we can stand tall. There always will be people who don't want to tell this story. But if you are strong in your beliefs, if you are strong in your accomplishments, you can stand up tall for what you have achieved, and you will not feel threatened by what somebody else achieved. When somebody tries to minimize the achievement of other organizations, in a sense, I feel a little sad. They don't feel accomplished enough to say, I did this, without hiding what another person did. So I invite them. Tell me what you did, I'll tell you what they did, and we'll work together.
Mark, I overheard Miss Yolanda moments before we sat down tell a young girl, you can make history. I could hear her breathing inspiration into her ear there. What is that idea? For any families, parents, or teachers who might be watching this, what's the best way for them to connect their kids to the stories in here and to keep that Spitfire, Tuskegee spirit alive in St. Louis?
I think that's one thing that's really special about museums is that we have all exhibits, including this one, have artifacts that can really hook you, that can grab you. And that, I think, that's especially powerful for kids. So, they come in here and they might see the P-51 Mustang, just this glamorous looking, fantastic airplane, or the Stearman that the Tuskegee Airmen trained with. And that's going to hook a lot of young kids, right? And I call it the history sneak attack, right? So they're in here and they're looking at the cool stuff, but they're also learning at the same time, and they're learning these incredible stories of these individuals and things that have transpired, and they're learning about their past and their ancestors and whatnot. So I think for museums and for this exhibit specifically, those kind of art. I mean, we have the original patches in this exhibit that were designed by Disney, right? Like who would have thought, right? Like Disney, RKO are designing patches for the military. So young artists young children who are into art, they're going to come and see those things, and then they start to get interested, right? And they start to read more, and they start to get more and more interested, and it kind of spirals, and all of a sudden they're learning about all these past things and these incredible people that have preceded them. Yeah.
It strikes me that we're sitting here having this conversation on Juneteenth, the day we think about delay and how long it takes for, I'm going to use this term in air quotes, someone to come save us. And I've heard many people reiterate that thought and say there is no one coming to save you. On the other side of that coin, who's stopping you from stepping up and doing something about that? How do you think about the commemoration of Juneteenth and the connection that it has to this exhibit today?
Well, yesterday somebody reminded us Juneteenth was the day that a certain portion of Americans realized they were free. But even that did not grant magical freedom. And there is an individual responsibility that we all share to get the best education, to learn the most about financial literacy, about opportunities, about education. I was a teacher, I was an officer, and my job as a teacher is to teach your child. Your job as a student is to do your homework and to learn. Your job as the parent is to make sure that there's an environment to learn. And the job of the administration is to make sure that they have the resources. We all have a responsibility. And when you say, you saved me, you're taking away the power that we have. So as much as we can, there is stuff that we can do. There are limits also. If there are no fresh vegetables in your neighborhood, I can understand. But I have a garden, let's grow something. The most that we can do is what we should do. And there is more that we can do. And it only may be this much, or it may be this much. But just like I challenged the young lady, what you gonna do? I'm waiting.
There's a comedian right now, Ronnie Chang, who's making the circuits and has a joke that says, do your homework for your country. Maybe you can make an argument that in doing those things you should do, there's a patriotic bond there.
I would totally agree. We are all Americans, and we will succeed when all of us contribute. So anytime somebody says, well, I'm just not going to participate, or I'm not going to learn, or I'm not going to do X, Y, Z, that minimizes our success. So every one of us has a role, not any bigger than your role or my role. But if you're not doing your best that you can do today, I'm looking at you.
And the person, you told some stories to the crowd who gathered here today. My last question will just be, are there those moments, those lessons, those little stories from World War II that stick with you, that remind you of that lesson, that daring courage in the skies?
Should I tell Mama's rules?
Sure, sure. I was going to say one thing real quick, and this for me is perhaps another key takeaway for the Tuskegee Airmen. You know, when these young men and women were interested in this service, you know, serving their country in a war, flying airplanes, fixing airplanes, being nurses, they were told, well, the book says you can't do that, right? There's Army policy that says African Americans can only serve in the most, you know, menial, you know, and how easy would it have been for them to say, oh, the book says we can't do it, so might as well go home and pack it in, and I guess we can't do it. And that's not what they said at all. And I think for me, that's always a life lesson, right? Like, those rules were written by all the rules around us are written by somebody else, right? And that doesn't mean that they're right. And I'm not calling for anarchy or anything here, but there's always room to say, I think that rule is wrong, or I think that policy is wrong, and I want to change that. I want to challenge that, and I want to change it because I think there's a better thing here. And I think that's a key takeaway of their story, is that they said, no, we can fly airplanes, and we can do a damn good job of flying those planes. We can do a perfect job of maintaining them and escorting these bombers. We can do all this stuff. Just because you say we can't, it doesn't mean we can't. We're going to do it.
That's part of the lesson of history, and the pursuit toward a more perfect union is that our government, their laws, and their policies have not always been just.
No. And one of the things we have to learn is, if we believe something and we're going to take action on it, are we brave enough to stand up? The Freedmen Mutiny that happened in World War II, 103 Tuskegee Airmen tried to integrate an integrated club. They were treated worse than German POWs. 3 of them were charged. 1 of them had a felony conviction for 40 years and a dishonorable discharge. He and all of them in World War II, if you disobey a lawful order, you could be shot. But they knew that they were right. They garnered the support of their community, and they stood tall. So if you believe something, then stand tall. Are you brave enough to say, this is wrong, here's where I stand? Or are you just going to say, well, that was wrong, I wish somebody would change it? No, again, I challenge you. Stand tall and by your convention.
Isn't that a little harder, though, when it's your own government telling you
the government said the Tuskegee Airmen couldn't fly. We did a study, really smart people said they couldn't. The government said women, oh, I don't know, they can't fly fighter airplanes because they're girls. You had a little brother or a big brother said, you can't do this, you're too short. There will always be somebody in your life that says you can't. And if you believe them, you can't. But if you believe in yourself and you believe in the legacy of the Tuskegee Airmen, you can. And so yes, the government right now says a lot of things. The government is made up of people. Where do you stand on those policies and the logical conclusions of those policies?
We met a lot of folks here, from an old friend who never forgot, to a young pilot who's not yet licensed but is lifting off anyway. You might say the Tuskegee Airmen fly once again. Not in formation over Europe, but in the hearts of those who believe, like them, that freedom is always deserving of a fighting chance. Until next time, we're off the record.